Okay, so we're recording. Well, good evening, everyone. And tonight we're going to talk about, we're actually going to take a little sneak preview of a new, new program, not a computer program per se, but a new program I have, which I've actually been working on for quite a number of years. Actually, like a lot of years since I first became a certified financial planner back in 1986. I've been kind of working on this idea and just developing things over time. 1986 for you young folks, that's a long time ago, I'm sure. Anyway, long time for me too. But in 2012, I started this website here, the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report, which looks like this. This was started in February 2012. And it started out as it was going to be an investment newsletter, actually. And this website has actually become the investment newsletter. This was an investment newsletter for a while. But at the time I started this one, I was also teaching a lot of classes. I've been teaching for about 26 years, so that's a long time too. Anyway, I started this website as an investment newsletter, but then I also started just putting stuff that I was using in my classes on this website. And over time, it actually quickly became more of a repository for lectures and notes and things like that, and less of a newsletter. And so right now it's got an awful lot of stuff on it. Hopefully I've got, yeah. And we're going to actually go through some things on this tonight because a lot of what I have on here applies to this new program, which I'm calling the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report Wealth Blueprint. That's a mouthful. And I wanted to really distinguish this wealth blueprint from other people's wealth blueprints because there's a lot of them out there. And ours is quite a bit different, actually. And I may or may not discuss that a little bit or more tonight, but keep in mind that the concept of intrinsic value and the way that we approach this really is fundamentally different from what a lot of other people do. And again, that will be in future podcasts and so forth. But what we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to take a little sneak peek of the Intrinsic Value Wealth Reports Wealth Blueprint and Wealth Code. So what the Wealth Blueprint and the Wealth Code are is it's a set of tools, articles, podcasts, YouTubes, books, and so forth that all are integrated and come together to make up this program, which kind of falls generally under the topic or under the umbrella, if you will, of the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report Wealth Blueprint. And so just to actually kind of show you what this looks like a little bit, you all have seen this in this class. For some of the other people that may view this YouTube video may not be as familiar, so let me just show you. So we're going to go to this, to the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report, book number 4, and we're going to get on to part number 6, so I need to sign in. Okay. If you don't have an account, it's real easy to get one. It's a free sign up. You would sign up here under the register for an account. And so I, of course, I've already signed up. So now I just sign in. All right, and we're going to go to book number 4, part number 6, which I've already done. And this, by the way, has, as we've been working through in this class, has the financial planning worksheets and some other things as well. Down at the very, very bottom, again, as the class knows, you all have been here, we've talked about this quite a bit, is we have the this financial planning concept map. And this actually is now what I'm going to be calling the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report Wealth Blueprint. Okay, blueprint, because it looks like a blueprint, right? I mean, if you think about buildings and houses and computer programs and so forth, they all start with a blueprint, Let me just make sure I'm still recording here. Yes. Okay. Good. So, so anyway, this is a blueprint for building wealth, but it's really more than that. And as you guys know, and this is a financial planning class that we're doing here at Cal State LA. You know, it's not just a matter of building wealth. It's really a complete financial planning process that we're doing. However, with you folks being young and many people that will be viewing this YouTube presentation are going to be primarily interested in building wealth. But so it doesn't matter. You can look at it however you would like. So as either as just a general financial plan or as your blueprint for building wealth. And there's many, many overlaps. So again, you're going to find that on this website. By the way, this website is ivwealthreport.com, ivwealthreport.com. The other one, the newsletter, is ivwealthreportnewsletter.com. So there is a little difference. ivwealthreportnewsletter.com is the actual investment newsletter. ivwealthreport.com is this primarily educational website, which also has the financial planning materials on it, most of the financial planning materials. So so that's what the blueprint looks like. We've done a separate YouTube on this already, which is part of our YouTube channel, where we talked about this concept now. But again, now we're going to be calling this actually the wealth blueprint, as well as a general financial plan. Now, the other part to this is the Intrinsic Value Wealth Reports wealth code. And the code is really just the individual steps, which we're going to talk about a few of those tonight in a very broad form. But they're the individual steps that we'll be taking to actually implement this concept map of financial planning, or this wealth blueprint. And so many of the codes, many of the individual steps, are actually part of this blueprint. So things like the various strategies that we use, some of the tools that we have. And of course, as you know, this is in graph form as well. Pretty much everything that we're talking about tonight and that we're in the process of doing currently is in a draft format, because we're still developing the program. So let's see. So that's kind of the idea behind the blueprint. Gives you a kind of a map, if you will, to follow, broad overview of what the financial planning and the wealth blueprint, the wealth building process is all about. That's here on this concept map. Okay, so again, the blueprint is a combination of various tools, articles, and the code. It's a combination of tools, articles, podcasts, YouTubes, and books. And the platforms that they're on, and this is important to understand too, there's really two platforms that we're using in this whole scheme of things. The first is, as I mentioned, it's the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report.com, the first one I did in 2012. And then it's this newer one, the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report newsletter, which I started last year in January, I believe, of 2019. And it's now become more of a newsletter, although it does have some things of general financial planning nature as well. Now, this one is technically a paid website. However, you can get into this for as little as $1. You just go to the homepage, sign up. You can spend as much as $99, but I wouldn't suggest anyone do that. Get this, subscribe now, get this for $1. Everything's still kind of in flux and developing, so just spend $1 just to get into it, and it'll be $1, hopefully well spent. So these are the two platforms: the ivwealthreport.com and the ivwealthreportnewsletter.com. And I've kind of now. Oh, and by the way, then there's two other media portals, if you will. There's the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report Radio, which is actually a podcast. You can access the podcast from here. And right now I'm on Apple Podcasts. Podbean is the one I subscribed to and initially set up. I'm also on Spotify and Stitcher, and waiting for approval from Google. But this gives you plenty of options to subscribe to the podcast if you like, or just access it on any one of these. So these are the podcasts. We're starting to get quite a good little library of podcasts going now, and they're divided into sections. So we have weekly commentaries that we've been doing as part of this class, and then before then I just was recording those, and then I divided it into sections, and these sections will build as we get more topics. So right now we have a building wealth section. We have a financial planning and investment section, investment and financial analysis, and strategic foresight. Strategic foresight, let me just say a word about that, is futurist thinking, trying to forecast the future a little bit. You guys as business students, soon to be business grads, it's so important for you to be able to look at what's on the horizon in terms of new products, new ways of doing things, and so forth. And of course, this coronavirus situation that we're in now has spawned in a very, very short period of time a whole range of new things that are happening. So, strategic foresight is always kind of trying to figure out what these new trends and new developments are. So I did a little podcast on that. You can click on there to get to the podcast portion to listen to that. That was actually part of the class, so you guys heard it. So there's the podcast, which is part of this whole group, and then there's the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report TV, which is my YouTube channel. And again, we're getting quite a few things. This YouTube recording tonight will be put up on the TV portion sometime later this week as kind of an introduction to the whole wealth building process. Probably go into this section right here, as well as maybe actually in the welcome section. So let's see. So these four things: the two websites, that website, this website, and then the podcast and the TV, the YouTube station, make up what I call the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report Media Group. Kind of a fancy name, but why not, right? We always should be having high aspirations. So my hope is that someday this will be it will definitely have a lot of material on it. Hopefully, it will be followed by a lot of people. People will find it useful. That's kind of the goal here. Okay, so the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report Media Group is composed of these four things, and so this whole process that we started out with as part of this class, and we were talking about, how one of the main objectives, especially for you folks because you're younger, is to build wealth. All of these different things, these two websites, and the podcast, and the TV station, and the articles and the tools, and eventually there'll be a book or two written on all this. These become all part of a comprehensive, integrated process to just help people understand how to build wealth and do it, and actually, hopefully, everyone will do it. They'll build wealth. So the sort of the tagline or the concept, or whatever you want to call it, the objective of all this is really that my belief is anyone can build wealth, and everyone should do that to the extent they want to. Now, I do want to say one thing, and I'm going to modify this chart a little bit here. This is always this chart's always evolving too, especially here in the early stages. So this is not a final draft, of course, but in fact, this one's still a couple of versions behind. But one thing I'm going to put over here under the goals track is non-financial goals, okay? Because there are goals that are worthy and important, and maybe even more important than financial goals, strictly financial goals. So I'm going to put that as kind of a category, at least for people to consider. And some of those non-financial goals could be, like I say, just as important, if not more important, than the actual financial goals. So let's see. Looking at my notes here. Oh yeah, I did want to run through some of the things that will actually go into here. So again, as the broad platforms are the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report, the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report newsletter, And then within those, and then the radio, which is the podcast, and the TV, which is the YouTube station. But within those, on the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report newsletter, some important sections are the commentary. And as you know, we've been going through those each week. I need to log in here. So let's see, do that real quick here. 17. Before I put this captcha on here, I got probably as many as 20 spam emails, spam emails a day. And I have a wonderful company that does work on my on this website, a company called 9 Seeds. By the way, if you're interested in them, I'll just shoot me a note and I'll connect you with them. They're a great little company. Never met them in person. They're based out of Nevada, but they've just been great to work with. So anyway, okay, so the weekly commentaries, just run through that real quick again, because this is kind of part of this whole wealth building blueprint, financial planning process. So the weekly commentaries every week, we'll do this little article that when we're done with this little podcast, as I mentioned, we're going to stop and then we'll do the weekly commentary, do a short one tonight. But, I just talk about the things that are kind of going on in the week, in the markets, in the economy, and so forth. Lots been talked about what's happening with the coronavirus situation. In the last week's section, we hit some of the highlights of news items. Here I've got some short-term economic indicators. And again, this has all been described before, or we'll talk about those in future podcasts and YouTubes. But a lot of good information here. These are short-term economic indicators. The AAII, American Association of Individual Investors, which we just watched that webinar, they put out an investor sentiment survey. So they poll their members and try to get a consensus of what the members think is going to happen in terms of the markets. And this is actually an indicator that's used by a lot of different economic groups and so forth. So it's actually it's a good gauge because their membership base is so big. It's a good gauge of what's happening, how investors are feeling about the markets. Gross output. My good friend Mark Skaldsen has popularized this approach. We'll talk about that in a future podcast. And then I try to cover what some of the economic forecasting groups do. This is the Survey of Professional Forecasters, which the Federal Reserve of Philadelphia puts out, and then the National Association of Business Economics puts out their survey. We have a stock market valuation section. We'll cover that in the commentaries every week. And then I try and give a little overview of where I think we are in terms of how we should be investing and where the economy is and so forth. Again, that's all part of the commentary that we do on a weekly basis. Put a chart in there of chart for review and thought, changes every week as to kind of just some current topics that are shown in the charts. This is a little economic forecasting model, and we're going to talk about one of the books is a very short economic mini course in economic forecasting. And this derives from that little mini course. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Give a little thought for the week in this particular one. A little quote from Warren Buffett that investors should be, we as investors should be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful, meaning that when everyone's real euphoric and they bid prices up, that's when we should be fearful. And when everyone else is fearful and they beat prices down, or we should be greedy like heck, because that's that's when we get some good values. As the webinar we just watched indicated, the value investing is a very good approach. We'll talk a little bit more about that tonight after this little section. I have some announcements, and I always finish up the commentary with this intrinsic value wealth creation pyramid. Again, we did that as a separate podcast a couple of weeks ago. So that's in our YouTube channel section. So that's one of the real key things for understanding, or as part of this wealth building process, is to look at this commentary on a weekly basis, sign up, and and get the commentary and read that. Just want to mention real briefly, we also have a section here called investments. And this is not real current, mainly because the markets hadn't been particularly good to invest in. This will be updated real soon. But this Cassandra list is a stock picking model that I developed for about 27 years ago. Again, that'll be a subject for another podcast and or YouTube. But it's a factor-based approach, much like the webinar we just watched from AAII. So more on that later, but that's one of the resources that will be part of this wealth blueprint. And then again, we have model portfolios. There's model portfolios. And then we have the podcast page here, which we just talked about. And then we also have a resources page. And there's some economic and investment resources here, which again, if you sign up for the newsletter, you get links to some really good economic or sources of economic data. Okay, so that's the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report newsletter. Now the other website, again, and both of these websites and all the material we talked about, this is all part of our whole blueprint and wealth blueprint and wealth code package, if you will, that we're putting together. And so on the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report, this is divided into books because there's so much on here. There's, I don't know how many actual resources, are probably at least 150, because each one of these, books has, multiple sections under it and so forth. And I'm not going to go through all those tonight. Again, that'll be a subject for a future, future little podcasts and YouTubes. But just a couple of highlights. Book number 2 was actually one of the first books I wrote, where I was trying to explain the theory of value drivers and how to think about the investing process, and in particular think about how companies create value and how we as investors should look at companies and determine if they're creating the value, and then make a determination on how to invest with that. The theory of value drivers, that was my doctoral dissertation. You can click on that to read the whole dissertation. I don't suggest it's 300 plus pages, and I think there's about over 300 references. But read chapter 5 if you're interested, if you want to learn a little bit about value driver theory. Value driver theory basically, it said, we know how to calculate the value of companies. We do that. You guys are finance majors for the most part. We do that using the discounted cash flow analysis, DCF approach. But then the question was, well, we know how to calculate the value, but how do we? But how is that value created by companies? And so that's where value driver theory came in. Again, that's a subject for a whole different podcast or series of podcasts and YouTubes. But that's just a brief overview. So book number 2 started with this theory and then applies it in various contexts. So in first case, so it gives an overview of value driver theory. Again, building on book number 1, but then it also in part number 2, creating value, we're talking to companies. So how do you create shareholder value as a company, whether it's a big Fortune 500 company, big global company, or whether you're just a little entrepreneur? Either way, you want to be creating value for your shareholders. And in this context, we're talking about the value that's created that we measure with discounted cash flow approach. Although other types of value, for example, the whole idea of conscious capitalism, again, subject for another night, watching out for all the stakeholders and that sort of thing. Those really all feed into the monetary value that's created that we measure through DCF. So anyway, that's part number 2. Is that creating value? We're talking mainly to to entrepreneurs and companies. And then part number 3, we're talking to investors. And so as investors, how do you recognize and analyze that value that's been created to make a good investment decisions? Okay, let's see. These are the Cassandra book number 3. This was some early writings on picking stocks and so forth. That's now covered more in this website, that one there. Okay, book number 4. So book number 4 is the one that really is an integral part of this wealth blueprint, because it's really our financial planning chapter, if you will. And again, we'll talk more about book 4 in separate podcasts and separate YouTubes. And we've already kind of shown you part number 6, book number 4, which is actually shown up here on the screen now, where we find the financial planning worksheets and the financial planning concept chart, this one here. And then there's also the calculators we talked about so far in class, and also in your homework assignments, you had to use the goal calculator. There's goal and retirement calculators are in this drop-down menu here. So, and we did a separate podcast, YouTube, already on the goal calculator. Okay, let's see what else. That was book number 4. Oh yeah, book number 6 is Simple and Effective Economic Forecasting. So I actually created a mini course in economic forecasting with book number 6. That'll be a subject of a separate YouTube channel, podcasts. There'll probably be many on this because there's many parts to it. So for now, just recognize that it's there. But again, as investors and people that are wanting to put together good financial plans, as well as build wealth using the wealth blueprint, you have to understand economics and where the economy is and so forth. So book number 6 is designed to kind of give you that mini course in economic forecasting. So again, as we go forward, we'll have a lot of different YouTubes and podcasts on that. And then finally, just to kind of highlight, I won't go through all these different books, but one that's kind of important is book number 9, 4 Easy and Powerful Steps to Building Wealth. And I'll leave that for now for you guys to go through on your own. Again, we'll do separate podcasts and YouTubes on this. And you've already been through part of this because we did the, we came here to get the, where was it? So, book number 9. You guys did your asset allocation, I'm sorry, your risk tolerance questionnaires from this page. And also you started to see, given your risk tolerance, what a suitable allocation would be. So I think this page would probably be the, let's try that again. Must be this one here. Yeah, there we go. So this page here, which is called Asset Allocation Research, is part of the drop-down menu. This is where you have your questionnaires that you can go through, that you guys all went through to try and determine your risk tolerance. And then you put that together with the, once you figure out what your risk tolerance is, then you get some ideas of what your allocation should be in terms of what asset classes you should be in. All right, and then another part which is very important is this intrinsic value wealth creation pyramid. I'm actually going to show it to you from here because this is the easiest place for it to access it. At the bottom of every one of the commentaries, I mentioned this before, we have down here, intrinsic value wealth creation pyramid. And so when you click on that, it shows you the pyramid. That's the pyramid. I wrote an article for Forbes magazine, which talks about that. 9 of the best ways to build wealth. There's my Forbes page, one of the best ways to build wealth. I don't know how many views this has now, but at one time it was up over 30,000 views. So this article describes that pyramid, but again, we actually talked about that in a podcast with this class, which is on the YouTube channel, and we'll talk more about that pyramid because that wealth building pyramid is a very integral part of our wealth blueprint. Okay, look at my notes here. I think that might be it for tonight. So let's see. Yeah. So that again, that's just kind of. Let me get off that page here. All right. So that's an overview. Again, this is a whole process. In this platform, which consists, again, just to kind of wrap this up, consists of the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report. It consists of the Intrinsic Value Wealth Report newsletter. I'll get back up to the top there. So the Wealth Report, the newsletter, and then it consists of the podcast and the YouTube channel. Those four things, with all of the resources that are part of it, make up this whole process, which is summarized, or the overview of it is given. This is the actual blueprint, which is our concept map, and then so the wealth blueprint is this concept map, and then the wealth code is all the different parts, the things I've just been through, as well as the items that are on here, and other things that we will come up with over the coming days and weeks and months and even years. So that's the sneak peek. Much more to come. This is just a very starting, work in progress, very starting. But I wanted to kind of give you guys and others that might happen upon our website and say, what the heck is all this about? And what's the big picture here? How do we tie all this in together? And so there's definitely a plan. Hopefully this gives you a little overview of how it all does tie in together. But watch for our various podcasts and articles and YouTubes, and then hopefully it'll start making some sense about how you put all this together to build wealth or just do general financial planning. Okay, with that, I'm going to stop the recording.